Welcome back. It is a Drunk Capitalist back here today, and we have another article from Market Watch. I haven't done one of these in a while, but this one caught my eye this week, and I could not help but to hold off and read it with you guys. So, this is the moneyest, and the title of this question slash article is my second husband would like to inherit part of my home as he pays half the mortgage. I want 100% to go to my children. Who's right? So now that's the title of the article, just recently published in the past week or so. It has another message underneath that says the mortgage would be paid off out of my estate, but who should cover taxes and homeowner insurance each year? Just off the bat, this just seems like a situation where a wife who's married, she feels as though she owns the home. It's her home, but he helps pay half the mortgage at this point. So just off that, I would say that yeah, he probably, he deserves some ownership, but there's probably more to the story when it comes to the money. So let's just get right into that story. So it says, Dear Quentin, I've been married for 5 years to my second husband. So they've only been married for 5 years. We are living in the house that I bought over 20 years ago that is in my name only, as is the mortgage. Okay, so basically her name alone is going to be on the deed because it's her home. And she's the only one on the mortgage because it's her mortgage because it's her home. And she bought the house over 20 years ago. So typically people have a 30-year mortgage. So basically she's been paying it for almost 30 years. So she's paid pretty much up to 2/3 of the entire length of the loan and the amount that she owes on the home plus the interest. So it says he pays me a little less than half the amount of my mortgage, and we split other bills, with me paying a little more on utilities. I also pay for all upkeep and improvements to the house, although he does some of the labor. So right here, it basically says that she is doing the lion's share of the actual finance regarding the home, because he pays a little less than half of the amount of the mortgage, meaning he pays less than 50%. And then they split all the other bills, probably like gas, electricity, and like whatever the other costs associated with the homes, but she pays more for the utilities than he does. So basically, in all counts of the situation, she is paying more. She has paid more for the house over the course of the term of the mortgage, and while living with him, she's paying more per month for the home. But she adds that he does do some of the labor. What does the labor mean? Does it mean taking out the trash? I mean, just off putting it this way, I feel like he lives there. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it would be kosher for him to live with her and not pay anything and not do anything, because then at that point, why are you even married? Like, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I can't really say that, oh, he came, 20 years after her purchasing the home and wants the right to the home. That just sounds weird. But again, this is a marriage, and it's something you need to talk about prior to getting married, because everyone's expectations are all over the place. So you got to be careful. I have an adult child and grandchild, and he has adult children as well. I would like to leave my house to my child, but would allow my husband to continue to live there as long as he'd like, or until his death. The mortgage would be paid off out of my estate. So essentially, if she were to pass away, she wants her children and her grandchildren to inherit the home that she's been paying for decades. He has adult children. We don't know if based on this so far, we don't know if he owns another home, but I personally don't think it would be necessarily right for that home to have to be divvied up by all of those people, like his children and her children, because if we're being real, he's only been married to her for the past 5 years, so he's probably only been paying for the past 5 years, and he's been paying less than half for the past 5 years. So in percentage terms, right? So you're talking about 5 years out of 30 years, right? So basically, that's close to about 16% of the mortgage has been paid in the past 5 years. Just 16%. That's less than 1/5 of the mortgage. And of course, if you do the math, he's only been paying less than half of that. So he's been paying. So in total, he's been paying about 8%. And if the mortgage ends in 30 years and he pays for about 10 years, he will be paying half. So he would still only be paying 1/5 of the mortgage. And at the end of the day, he lives there. Like, so why wouldn't he be paying part of the mortgage? But the thing is, he would technically, in my opinion, personal opinion, he would only be entitled to 1/5. I'm not saying he's not entitled to anything, but he's only entitled to 1/5. And this person so far hasn't brought anything else up that he owns, what other things that he would be passing down if he were to pass. And if we're being completely honest, we're talking about men and women here. The odds of her passing first or passing before him is pretty slim. Like, it usually just doesn't happen for whatever reason. It's usually just not a thing. So the idea of him trying to set up a situation where once she passes, it should be going to his children just sounds kind of suspicious. I don't know. But she did mention that the mortgage would be paid off in the case that she were to pass away. So he wouldn't even have to, if she passed tomorrow, he wouldn't even have to worry about the mortgage. So that's why she's concerned about whether or not who's going to take care of like the taxes and all that stuff, because she pays for that stuff. Who should cover taxes and home insurance each year? I'm leaning towards specifying that my husband cover that, and also leaving funds for upkeep, such as a new roof or air conditioning. I think it's the most generous for her to be like, hey, I'll let you live in the house. You know, it'll be mortgage free, rent free. You'll just pay insurance or whatever, and you can live in there until you also pass. My husband and I disagree on whether he should inherit part of the house. He feels he's paying part of the mortgage. I don't want a portion of the house to go to his children when he dies, or for my child to have to buy them out. And this is where it gets tough. It's where it gets tough, because he feels like he's entitled to that portion, and that his children should be entitled to that portion. But the question is this. Not to be that person, but he is a grown man. Does he have any other properties for his children to inherit? Because I would understand if he had another property that he lived in for the other 20 years. They're probably around the same age. He doesn't have any property to send to the children, and if he does, I don't see why he would be so concerned over claiming 1/5 of the property if he already has a property to send to his kids to inherit. And I think that's where the dilemma lies, is that he probably doesn't have anything to pass down to them, and this is the only way he can find something and finagle something so he doesn't feel like a failure, like as a person that can't pass anything down to the next generation. It doesn't really feel too good, especially if you've been here for decades on decades on decades. So I can understand where he's coming from with that. What is the best way to do this equitably? So our Market Watch person answers and says, your husband came into your life late in the day. You've been married 5 years. You bought your home 20 years ago, long before you met your husband, and you have worked hard to pay it off. After 5 years of marriage, giving him a life estate in your home so he lives there rent-free in the event that you do predecease him is generous. Right. In the event that you do predecease him, because come on, let's be real. The odds of a woman passing before her husband is usually pretty low. And I do think it's generous, and I think it's completely right to allow him to live there rent-free as an old man until he passes, but the ownership of the home still remains with her children. Your husband agreed to pay you an amount that is equivalent to 50% of the value of the mortgage, but he is not actually paying half your mortgage. For better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, he is paying rent. As harsh as this sounds, it's his responsibility to buy a home for himself and have as an inheritance for his children. Right. So let's break down like what this person is basically saying in this statement of he agreed to pay you an amount that is equivalent to 50% of the value of the mortgage, but he is not actually paying half your mortgage. So what they're basically trying to say is that the essential deal sounds like 50% of the mortgage, but in reality, he's not actually paying half the mortgage, because half the mortgage would be actually half of the entire mortgage, which is the entire document of what the house is worth, plus all the interest and fees that come with having a mortgage. That would be half. That would be thousands of dollars, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know how much the house is worth or how much the house cost. But basically, he is just paying less than half of the payments, partial payments, because if he were to divorce her, he would not be beholden to any of those payments, and she would still have to make those payments. And she'd been making those payments before she was ever with him. So these are just payments. These are not the actual mortgage. These are just the mortgage payments, and he's paying less than half of the mortgage payments. So let's keep going. If your husband is living in the home, it's absolutely fair that he should pay for the upkeep of the property, homeowner's insurance, and property taxes and other costs, especially given that your estate would pay off the mortgage. Every last detail should be ironed out by an estate planning and trust attorney. Yeah, I think it would be fair, like, especially given the fact that it seems that he's never owned a home. I think it would be completely fair that if you were to pass, or this one were to pass, that he would pay for the upkeep, because it wouldn't make sense to have the kids pay for the upkeep of the home. The kids don't live there, they just own the home. But that's also something that could be ironed out. It could be like, hey, he has been paying 8% of the mortgage for the past 5 years or whatever, and I feel like if the kids are going to inherit the home, then they should take care of the home, and while he lives there until he passes, and then they could just completely take the whole home. But if that's the case at that point, then I don't know. Maybe give him a fifth of the home and have his kids take care of the home in the interim while he's still living there. I mean, there's so many ways that you can organize it, but that's why you need an estate planner, and you also need to be talking about these things prior to actually getting married, especially if you don't have a prenup or you don't have a trust set up or whatever the case may be. Certain things just need to be ironed out before you settle down and get comfortable, because then weird things start popping up. The life estate avoids probate because the real estate goes directly to the children upon the death of the life tenant. The life estate can also protect the home from a Medicaid lien upon death, although there is a 5-year transfer penalty period imposed for nursing home level Medicaid. Okay, there are cons too. If the life tenant doesn't care for the house and it falls into disrepair, there is not much the beneficiary can do to protect their future investment. If the life tenant becomes incapacitated and needs a nursing home, the house will not pass on to the heirs until they die. But again, yeah, exactly. So basically what they're saying is that if he lives there after she passes and doesn't take care of the house, and the house goes into disrepair, there's nothing that the beneficiaries can do to protect their future investment. And that's not even just the part of like physically repairing the home or keeping up with it. It has also to do with also paying the property taxes, because even when you pay off your mortgage, the property taxes don't stop coming. They will keep coming and they keep increasing. So if he can't keep up with the property tax of the home, well into his 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, right? If he can't keep up with it, and I have reason to believe he probably cannot, because if he's already paying less than half the mortgage, he doesn't own a home, probably doesn't own a home. I don't have any reason to believe that he would be able to keep up with the property taxes as by himself, even though there is no mortgage. You wouldn't have to pay for mortgage. But, so there's no way for the children to then protect the home because they have to wait to be able to inherit the home until he passes. And I think it would just be fair for the children to just own the home as soon as she passes and just allow him to live into the home. No solution is perfect. For instance, your children, if they needed cash after you passed away, would have to wait to inherit the property until your husband dies. But a life estate, assuming you put this in place months ahead, provides your husband with a roof over his head for the rest of his life. That's not a bad deal after 5 years of marriage. It's right. Like, that's the most generous thing you could do is just like, well, you could live here if I pass away. Like, I won't put you, me passing won't result in you being out on the street. Like, that's not something you would want. Like, you definitely don't want to sleep next to someone that is just like, yo, if I die, that's it. You're screwed. Like, but also I'm not sure how happy she is lying with someone that is kind of like, will be on the street if she dies. You know what I mean? Let's get into like some of the things that people are saying about this. Community conversation. Sigh. Another case of married couples having his money and her money, which is understandable in situations like this, but when it comes to assets, but not income. Another case of people getting deeply involved financially without discussing everything. That's what I'm saying. Readers, please settle the financials before you get married, even if it's not very romantic. Otherwise, you'll regret it later. Yeah, I second that because it's just like you got to figure out where the kinks are going to be. Because you definitely don't want to be up in court fighting about money or anything like that. And they do say the number one cause of like divorce is finances. Nice letter, and I can see how and why LW reached out. The burr in my shoe is the who's right part. This is a doesn't matter who's right situation. You own the home. It's not community property. If you want to leave it to your kids, do. If you want a life estate, do. It's solely your choice. For me, I'd say that half the mortgage and upkeep 20 years after you bought the place is the price for living there, not an investment into an asset. If it makes it easier, take equivalent amount and say you owe X amount a month for living expensive. Have him pay you direct and you make all payments. Either way, take care of what you want, not what others want. So basically, this person is just basically like, nah, bro, this is not our house. This is my house. You live here. You live with me. So you help me pay the bills because you live here. And for all intents and purposes, I'm going to make sure that it doesn't even look like you pay the mortgage. You pay me money and I pay the mortgage. And your money would not be going directly into the account. In some states, the fact that the husband pays half the mortgage for some period of time will give him claim to some percentage of ownership. Once you commingle assets, that way the result can let him argue with your children over ownership after the wife is gone, if she dies first. It's probably safer to pay the mortgage from a separate checking account, wife only, and then have the husband pay for something else instead. Car, travel. In the same way, if he pays for what are determined to be capital improvements, then he could claim part ownership later. That might put your children in a position having to decide whether to pay a lawyer to sort it out or just buy him out. You do need a lawyer to get this right, and the lawyer you choose should be able to answer real estate ownership questions for the state in the introductory interview, or move on to find a more well-prepared lawyer. Listen, it's what you don't want. You don't want your kids fighting with this man after you pass away. You're not going to be able to rest well. I'm having a similar situation. I'm the husband. I would never ask what is not mine to begin with. It's hers, and it's her decision to decide. Agreed. The money solution is fair and practical. There's little more to this. You probably both have other assets, both qualified and non-qualified. So where do they go? How are you planning to finance long-term care for each other? Consider life insurance on each other so you replace each other's salary, social security, pension, have funds to equalize bequeaths to children. The life insurance can have a long-term care rider to provide funds while alive if you either need long-term care. Yes and no. Here's my thing when it comes to life insurance. Well, first of all, it's worth it, and yes, you should get life insurance. policies for each other and for help with the children or whatnot. But if they haven't already set up life insurance policies at this point, usually when you set up a life insurance policy very late in life, it is way, way, way more expensive, and also like life insurance is a very complicated thing, and I feel like it's something you really need to put research into before you even purchase it, because there's a lot of like weird things going on with life insurance, especially these days. Is borderline scamming. Of course, wife should pay all taxes, insurance, maintenance, major repairs. After all, that's the landlord's responsibility, not the renter. He's basically saying, yeah, your husband's just renting the place, bro. Like, it's your house. I thought the same at first, but on second thought, 20 years ago, home prices were so cheap compared to the present that at half mortgage, he's paying quarter or market rent. He's probably paying quarter of market rent. If she did that, it would be fair to raise the rent. No matter how you decide to allocate the money, he is to contribute an agreed upon amount. Okay. I receive a check every month from my renters, which goes into the account used to pay the mortgage company. That doesn't mean they are entitled to any ownership of my house. If the LW and her husband each write to separate checks to the mortgage company, then he might have some standard. Otherwise, he's simply renting. Yeah, I mean, the only difference is that he probably doesn't have a lease. Like, they don't have a lease agreement. Yes, you agree to share half this bed with me for $100 a week. I think you misunderstood her situation. The mortgage is not paid off. They're jointly paying it off. He pays a little less than half the amount of my mortgage, and we split other bills with me paying a little more. She, however, has significant equity in the house prior to the marriage with second husband, but he is not living rent-free, but until helping to pay off the mortgage isn't part of the house joint property. It is not clear if he pays money to her and she writes check from her own account to pay the mortgage. Yeah, everyone's just trying to figure out like the best way, but the usual consensus is everyone's just like, technically it's her house. Like, no matter which way you slice it, it's just a weird situation with, should he have rights to part ownership? We definitely feel like he don't own the whole house, because that just sounds wild. Like, you know how many scammers would be out here if all you had to do was pull up and marry somebody in the last few years of them owning a house, and now it's your house? That's crazy. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and something to really ponder on. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think, like what should really happen. Like, should she allow him to own the home and split it with everyone, his kids and her kids, or should she just allow him to live there until he passes and let the house be her kids' house? Like, let's really talk about it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.